Today is August 22nd. Welcome to Native Calgarian. Oki, Naganago, Mekoches Chestakomaki. My name is Red Thunder Woman. My married English name is Michelle Robinson, and I use she and her pronouns. Native Calgarian is being recorded on the lands of the Niitsitapi, which is the Blackfoot Confederacy. The Blackfoot south of the imposed U.S.-Canadian border are the Blackfeet, and north of the border are the Siksika, Gunai, and Bagani of the Confederacy. These lands are Treaty 7, signed September 22nd, 1877, with signatures that include the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Stoney Nakoda of the Wesley Chiniki Bearspaw Nations, and the Dene from the Tsuut'ina Nation. We acknowledge all First Nation, Métis, Inuit, status and non-status across Turtle Island as the keepers of these lands. All non-Indigenous are treaty partners with the government signing on your behalf. I honor the Blackfoot as the elders, and the members have been so kind to me on my Red Road journey. Elder Red Crane taught me how to pronounce my spirit name. I was born here in Calgary, or in Blackfoot, Mokinstis, as Michelle Elliott, another English name which has afforded me privilege in an English colonial world. My mother is Northern Slavey Dene, or Satu Dene, but my Indian Act imposed status card by the Canadian government says Yellowknives Dene. My father is so Canadian, I am a daughter of the Mayflower and a daughter of the American Revolution, while having an Indian Act imposed status card. I acknowledge my Dene lineage and that I was born here in Calgary, but my family is not part of the Treaty 7 signatories. My Dene lineage roots me in the land of the Hare people, also called the Great Bear Lake people, in Treaty 11. I'm a native to Turtle Island, and my Dene Nation is a visitor to this area of Clincho Tine Indahe in Satu Dene, meaning many horse town, named after the Calgary Stampede. Land acknowledgements are critical for creating a safer space for Indigenous, as well as honoring the host as the guest and honoring my role as a treaty partner. My humblest apologies to the Blackfoot elders and language keepers as I try to learn proper pronunciation. Any mistakes or misinterpretations will be on me. I encourage questions so that any misunderstandings can be cleared up as soon as possible. I don't speak on behalf of all Indigenous. I just share my journey down the Red Road. If you're experiencing emotional distress after hearing anything I talk about today and want to talk, there's the First Nation and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline at 1-855-242-3310. It's toll free, open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And for non-Indigenous, there are distress center lines in your area as well. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. I want to say thank you to previous donors for showing your support. If you value listening and can afford to give, thank you. To those that cannot afford to give but love to listen in, I'd like to hear from you. nativeyyc@gmail.com. Send in your comments or questions. I now have a YouTube channel. I'd love for you to subscribe. For podcasts, we're on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. And I want to give a shout out to my super loyal donors, Adam, Alexandria, Beatrice, Ben, Beth, Brian, Kat, Celine, Christina, Crystal, Diana, Jana, Jenny, Jocelyn, Judy, Karen, Kathy, Kenna, Leah, Lisi, Marisa, Melissa, Morami, Natalie, Nathan, Rebecca, The Sprawl, Shara, Sharon, Tammy, Tiffany, Vanessa, and Veronica. So with that, I'm so excited to have today a friend of mine that I've been so lucky to get to know, Vanesa Ortiz. She's she and her pronouns, and I'd love to have you introduce yourself in your way.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so honored to be here. Well, my name is Vanesa Ortiz. My pronouns are she, her. I am originally from the territories of the Coahuiltecan Nations in what we now know as Northern Mexico. And I immigrated to Canada around 4.5 years ago. I'm a mom. I am also an educator. And yeah, so we've been doing some work here around anti-racism, migrant justice, and yeah, I'm so honored to be here. Thank you, Michelle.
Oh, thank you. There's always so much going on, and I feel like sometimes we can just never kind of get into all of it. So, you and I, we've met through the book club, and we've talked about Indigenous issues, not just happening here in Calgary, in Canada, but globally, because I talk about the United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People, and for some reason, that seems to be such a difficult concept for non-Indigenous to understand, that it's bigger than just locally. It's everywhere, and the irony being that Calgary, especially, has so many companies that exploit globally. And we talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women here, which is 100% a problem, but it's also 100% a problem globally because of the land resource um, development that happens globally with companies that come straight out of Calgary.
Totally, yeah. And coming from Mexico, Mexico has that the majority of the mining that goes on in Mexico, it's definitely Canadian, and all this migration that people don't seem to understand. It's actually displacement from neoliberalist, extractivist companies that pay no taxes, that pollute our communities, that displace men and women, children, and then we see this huge caravans of migrants, and we're wondering where they're coming from. Well, that's one of the sources of immigration, right? Like there's a main reason for immigration. It's nobody wants to leave their home, right? Like nobody wants to leave family away, culture, language, our communities, right? It's survival. So when I came to Canada and I started seeing all the development and public services and everything so organized and I'm wondering, wow, like this is extremely well organized, and sometimes it's difficult to understand why other nations, other countries cannot be as organized or as rich. And the answer is, well, those nations, those countries, those communities have been impoverished for the longest time, right, since colonization. And Canada has been as well. Canada it's built on stolen Indigenous land, on Indigenous genocide, and also our countries, like all of our countries are, all of our territories are. And so yeah, it's I came to that realization once I was here. I'm like, well, you read about it, you learn about it through your books, through your readings, but once you see it, and once you face the reality that we are a flight away from this possession and from everyday suffering of Central American nations and indigenous communities in Mexico as well, particularly in the South. So yeah, that's a very sad reality, and that's what we are fighting to change.
Mm-hmm. No, and I'm grateful to have this conversation with you because now most people know I'm a liberal. And why am I a liberal? Because I'm in Calgary, and they're the only group that might possibly defeat a conservative. But by no stretch do I, deny what neoliberalism does here nationally, and as well as globally. And it's not okay. It's never been okay. And this is the system that somebody imposed. And I still can't believe people fell for the mortgage system. Here's a plot of land, and you're going to pay compound interest in order to live here, and it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever. I remember being in grade 11 and yelling at my math teacher. I'm like, who would institute this? Who thinks this is a good idea? How come nobody else gets to have compound interest except the bank? And yet everybody's okay with it. They just live with it, and I don't know how they do. I don't know how they do, knowing, Indigenous children are being apprehended so that people can happily live here. I don't know how they do it knowing Indigenous women are just dying. I don't know how they do it knowing Indigenous people are overrepresented in the population in the prison system. And then, really just okay with the death and destruction of Indigenous lands elsewhere. Like, I don't know how people sleep with that. And really what you and I were going to start talking about were a lot of things that were happening in Venezuela and Bolivia. And I'm just going to tell my viewers this because this is actually really funny to me, but never in the history of any of my guests have I gotten such a great, this is what I want to talk about, like, Word document, going over it. And I'm like, I don't even have to research this. She did all of this. Let's talk about it. So, like I have it in front of us, and I thought we'd start with Bolivia and work our way down to make sure we get it all because it's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, totally. So I would like to start talking a little bit about like giving a little bit of context on who Evo Morales is.
Sure.
Right? Like Evo Morales was the democratically elected president of Bolivia for 13 years, right? So which sounds like a long time, but when you compare it with like, Angela Merkel or, you compare it with other mandataries in the world, it's really not that long. But that's really not the point. Like really the point is that he was the first indigenous president in Bolivia, and he was the second indigenous president in the history of Latin America. The first indigenous president in the history of Latin America was actually a Mexican president. His name was Benito Juarez. And this is a man who separated church from state. So he's huge in our history. We celebrate him every year. But definitely, I mean, as much as is mentioned in speeches, political speeches, and everything that's around that celebration, it's definitely whitewashed a little bit. Like I mean, we say and we mention that he was an indigenous president, but we never go very deep on the racism and discrimination that he faced, because this was back in the 1800s, right? So the official parties, the official political parties have whitewashed that story, that history a little bit. And the second one was Evo Morales. He was an indigenous leader. He is an indigenous leader. He was a cocalero, which means he was in the coca fields. He was a union man, and he was voted in with a party called MAS, right? And the Bolivian state and the Bolivian people experienced a radical change when he took office. Evo Morales, he's Aymara. Aymara is one of the main indigenous groups, indigenous nations in Bolivia. He started as a union man, and then he started like being the leader of this political party, and then he got voted in. He got many lots of support from the Bolivian people because he was one of them. He was an indigenous person. He is an indigenous person, and Bolivia, around 60% of the population in Bolivia identifies as indigenous, right? So he was the symbol of the resurgence of indigenous rebellion, indigenous rights. And he did many things for Bolivia. And one of the main things he did was passing an anti-racist law. Like now it's penalized in Bolivia to be racist. I mean, in as institutions and as public servants, which is something really, we have diversity laws and we have multicultural laws, but he went right there and said, this is going to be an anti-racism law. So that was something that got protested by many sectors of society, including including the press, who was obviously supported by right-wing politicians and corporations that had been benefiting from the racist policies in Bolivia for such a long time. So when he goes in there and he overtly goes and says, I'm an indigenous person, and we are going to declare Bolivia to be a plurinational state, which means that 36 languages are going to be official languages, right? Every nation has the right to, self-government to their lands. We are going to nationalize hydrocarbons. We are going to nationalize energy, mining, electricity, oil, there's lots of gold in Bolivia as well, so that was nationalized as well, and foreign companies were asked to leave. So obviously, he always posed, an obstacle for neoliberal extractivist companies, right? He was always this obstacle, and there was like this constant reminder to him that he was an indigenous person and that he didn't deserve, or he didn't have what it take to be a president, right? So obviously, when we talk about the coup against his government, we are talking about a racist colonial coup, right? There's no way of denying that there is a racist component to this coup that the Canadian government sadly, unfortunately, supported immediately right after.
Yeah, no, we were one of the first ones to support it.
Exactly. Yeah, and that was a very sad moment for me being here, because you are like the image, like the foreign image of Canada, it's always of neutrality, and it's always of like respecting human rights, and that's the idea that many people have outside, and of course it is. I mean, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't like that. We honor, we really are grateful for everything here, but when we critically analyze its foreign policy, it is very problematic, right? It is very problematic, and we have to point it out, right?
Not just point it out, but for God's sakes, I mean, my neighbors, my bosses, like the folks that live here, on one hand, they're sweet, kind people who go to church every Sunday and, do what they think is good community work. But then they don't understand that their, Monday through Friday, 8 till 5 job is literally at the expense of killing other people. And even for me, like drafting wells and pipelines, I had no idea it was about land displacement. I had no idea, no concept of it. And so, I really want to talk about these things because there needs to be this, connection. And right now, I think we see a lot of Canadians really, trying to fight the Wet'suwet'en on their lands, on the Ente, where it comes to, you know, fighting the idea that resource extraction is somehow related to, MMIW, when it's so painfully clear and obvious. Here we have this mother and her sisters and their kids living on the pipeline route saying you cannot go here. RCMP with full guns blazing, having no problem taking a butt of a rifle to somebody's face, zero problem, and then to the cheers of average Canadians because their jobs somehow matter more than the lives of Indigenous people. Now take that and times it into another country, and again, the colonizers here just applaud because they get to somehow benefit. They think they're benefiting. The irony is, and COVID showed it, they're only a paycheck or two away before, they're as broke as anybody else.
Exactly.
So like the system is so rigged and it's right painfully in front of people and they just don't get it. So I don't mean to interrupt you. I'd love for you to continue.
Yeah, totally, totally. And when it's always, important to see outside of it's always good to analyze the inside politics and the foreign policy, like to the interior. Like Canada obviously has a colonial doctrine, and to the outside is it's blatant imperialism, and it's always been. And it's maybe because it's ties to the US or it's ties to Great Britain, or there can be many factors around it, but the reality is that the US with the Monroe Doctrine, did whatever they did whatever they wanted with Latin America, and they did it for so long. And in basically every single country, in Latin America, the US has destabilized their democratically elected governments in some way, shape, or form, whether it is like through a military coup, through a military intervention, such as Chile when they supported the, to Salvador Allende. So whenever there is like an effort to decolonize government, whenever there's an effort to democratize our governments and to have people heard, the U.S. suddenly decides that we need democracy, and that we need help, that we need their help, right? This is a constant, and this has always happened. So unfortunately, Canada, due to its geographical position and its ties, it's been an accomplice, right? The U.S. has been in Guatemala in 1954, in El Salvador in 1980 with Reagan, in Panama, and both times, like with Johnson and then with Bush, in Colombia with Clinton, and then in Colombia again in 2009 with Obama. There's really no country in Latin America that hasn't suffered from intermission or like an intervention from the US. Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Haiti, Cuba, Honduras, Nicaragua, every single country is going to have its history of, this is what the US did to us, right? And obviously, when you have the control of media and when you have the control of the narrative, of course, that's not what, Canadian or American, US newspapers or websites are going to say. And there's like a gap in information from our experiences as Latin American countries to what Canadians read. So I really feel that's very important to dig into this, to dismantle this narrative of the US being a savior of the world, and Canada has always been right behind the US, and it's understandable because there are economical interests in those areas. Latin America, it's extremely rich in resources. It's extremely rich in human capital, if you want to call it like the neoliberal term. So cheap labor, in the shape of sweatshops, of maquiladoras, and in the shape of exploitation. Here in Canada, the import of workers of like impoverished nations, Philippines, Mexico, Jamaica, you call it, any place in the world that it's importing, that Canada, it's importing workers to pay them minimum wage for working 12 hours a day. And those are all things that are not in the common knowledge of a Canadian, right? So sometimes it's important to get out of our comfort zone and analyze where everything we consume is coming from, whether it is food, whether it's energy, if it's minerals, right? And I don't know if you remember, Michelle, the tweet of Elon Musk, is that how you pronounce it? I'm not sure. This super rich guy who is the owner of Tesla. So he tweeted something about the coup, and he tweeted something, and then someone replied like, yeah, but you supported the coup in Bolivia for the lithium, because there are lots of reserves of lithium in Bolivia. And analysts think that was the reason of the coup. And he replied, we will coup whoever we want to, get over it, right? So it's that.
I actually didn't hear that. I didn't see that, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What a holy
yeah. And this is the hero for so many people, right? Because he's rich and white and I don't know, whatever, like tech savvy or whatever.
Yeah, well, if I had like, this is the irony. Like, there's that idea of privilege where he doesn't have the oppression of what you're dealing with, what I'm dealing with. So yeah, it's really easy to go to school and get all the things done when you're in that situation. I get so angry at that. folks are, oh, well, they worked really hard to get there. I'm like, really? Because this guy came on stolen land and this guy's from stolen land. And we just went from Britain over to the US, and it's the same type of colonialism. And here in Canada, we're the first ones to back Israel every time at the expense of Palestinians, every freaking time, because they don't really want to back Wet'suwet'en, and they don't really want to, address the 231 calls to justice when it comes to the amount of Indigenous people that are being murdered across Canada, and everybody's cool with it. And I'm going to mention that it's right off the heels off of a 14-year-old girl who was kidnapped by like a, I don't know, old man's freaking over 40 man. And they wouldn't even, release an Amber alert as if this is somehow okay. I guarantee if there was a 40-something-year-old Native man who, took a white little 14-year-old girl, there would have been like some dead guy, not some guy arrested just recently. Like this, I can't even believe we're having this conversation. But that is the racism that's so institutional here. And of course, if it's institutionalized racism here, it's no problem globally. And we were going to talk a little bit about getting rid of the Indigenous unity flag. I mean, we're in the lands of where our premier doesn't want to do land acknowledgements. We're in the place where Canada is not going to acknowledge Wet'suwet'en land, even though their own stupid Canadian court law with Delamuk that proved that it's Indigenous land. And yet, nope, we're just going to still keep going ahead with it, and we're going to pay a bunch of pipeline protesters to go and harass Indigenous women, and everybody is a-okay with that. And in fact, not just okay, they're going to watch NHL and going to enjoy all of the luxuries that the NHL players are getting, while the rest of us, like, we can't even collect CERB anymore.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, and definitely that was one of the components in the Bolivia coup that was so blatantly racist, so blatantly colonial. So basically, like the factual powers, neoliberal powers and corporation powers selected this woman to be the new president, right? Because they claimed that Evo Morales had there had been a fraud in the election, although he had 10 points more than the other party, right? But they claimed that it was a fraud, and it was later dismantled, this idea of a fraud. They later had to recognize that it was not, that it was a democratic election. But anyways, they chose this woman whose last name is Añez. She's an evangelist. So this is a religion that has a lot of power in Latin America, and it's the new, like, it used to be Catholicism, the way the population was controlled and the media was controlled, but it's now evangelists really who are using religion to continue to displace the communities and rip them from their culture and their language, and convince them that their original traditional sacred languages are wrong and that are evil, and all these ideas that have existed since colonization, like we know them really well, right? So this woman, she's an evangelist. She's her last name is Añez, and her first action as a president was to get rid of the unity flag, the Indigenous unity flag that is called Huipala. The Huipala, it's a 7-color flag that represents the unity among indigenous nations in South America. It represents unity. It represents the sacred knowledge, nature, the relationship with land. There's so much power around the Huipala, and it was reclaimed by indigenous nations in Latin America as a symbol of resilience, of unity, resurgence, resistance, right? And Evo Morales being an indigenous president, and having cut poverty from 60%, it went to 30% poverty rate in Bolivia. I mean, he did so many things for all people, but of course that means that privilege to the rich sector of the society, who is usually white in every single country, Who knows why, right? What a coincidence. In every single country in Latin America, rich people are white. Who knows why?
Uh-huh.
Uh,
I've heard
right?
that before.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. So, anyways, these people, the rich people, are angry that they're getting their privilege taken from them, and of course, they support the most racist, anti-indigenous person they can select, which is this person. She goes into the national palace, and she basically takes the flag from the front of the palace. Like she puts the flag away, and instead of the flag, she brings a giant Bible with her,
Ugh,
and
gross.
states that we are back, right? That's her statement. We are back. God is back in this presidential building, and we're here for good. So that symbolism of a non-indigenous person bringing the flag, and taking the original symbols from the people, it's something that we know very well. Like historically, it's been done before many times, and we know the results of that, right?
I wonder if
So
that would be why there's not 94 calls to action being implemented here in Canada.
yeah, I
Put
wonder
my
why.
finger on it.
How is it related, right? So yeah, so she's pro North American. She is an evangelical person. She has a history of tweets, 2014, 2016, 2019. She has a history of declaring, indigenous people as satanic. She holds an evangelical Bible from North American, religions, or cults, right? And getting, she after she took over control, indigenous communities were burned to the ground. Indigenous people were persecuted. Protesters were repressed, and I think she's proud of it. I think she said, like, we will never again. For example, there's an example that indigenous people in Bolivia have a celebration for the new year, and on that date she tweeted something about that being like an evil, satanic tradition that no good Christian would celebrate. So, like, inviting people to not celebrate that tradition. And so the symbolism around this evangelical white, and you know what, she's not even white, Michelle, and that's what bothers me the most, because internalized racism is such a disease in our countries, always wanting to approach whiteness and to get closer to whiteness.
Yep.
People want to get as close to whiteness as possible, and this decolonizing effort, like Evo's government was a decolonizing effort. And as much as we can recognize mistakes in Hugo Chavez's government, and now Nicolas Maduro's government, that there have been mistakes, many mistakes that of course have to be analyzed and fixed. But a huge part of it is a decolonizing effort, an effort that Mexico is doing right now. There was a very powerful movement in Latin American nations for a long time. And, suddenly, magically, those governments were intervened by the US, or by these factual powers. So we really have to think, what's the reason behind those coups, right? It's not only bringing democracy, it's getting rid of any decolonizing effort in those areas that are very rich in resources and in people.
Yeah, it's more like never bringing democracy. It's always bringing neoliberalism, where indigenous people at the expense of indigenous people, and using whatever slavery method possible in order to implement the neoliberalism. And then that internalized racism. I mean, we see it. I see it here. You see it here. And yet people are still so oblivious to what internalized racism is. And that, I know, it hurts. It makes it it makes it worse. And you know, our conversation being attacked by our own people because they still don't want to walk their road of decolonizing to understand the gravity of what internalized racism is. And you know, every day I'm unpacking it and trying to find new ways to you know, undo my thinking on that. And yet here I am trying to talk and raise awareness about what's happening in our Latin communities because of the work that we are doing as, you know, not just Canadians, not just as Albertans, but as Calgarians. And nobody wants to have those uncomfortable conversations because nobody wants to talk about resource extraction. I was just having a conversation with someone I love, and he had the audacity to say, well, you know, Syncrude was there for the flood here in Fort McMurray. And he wouldn't let me get a word in edgewise to talk about the displacement of all the Métis and all of the poisoning of the Dene down the river, right? Like there's those conversations are still not happening here, even with people that I love. I try so hard, but it's so difficult. So yeah, I understand that pain of seeing that, you know, people who should be on your side are actually the ones that are being the oppressor.
Exactly. And, you know, when you talk about extractivism and, you know, energy production, I can't, you know, I can't help it to think of the massacre of 43 student teachers. I don't know if maybe some of you have heard about it in your podcast, but in Guerrero, which is it's in southern Mexico, there was a massacre a few years ago, and there were 43 students from a teacher training college, which is a federal, public school for teachers, right? So 43 students disappeared one night, and they were disappeared by the state, and no one knew where they went. Like, no one knows where they are. Like, this is still a mystery, and we know that the state was involved. We know that some remains have been found, but there was always this, you know, no one understood why 43 students from a teacher training college it's a teacher training college that's you know, historically been very, very, you know, active, like politically active, always attending protests, always you know, this was in Mexico we call it semillero, which is like where new activists are born or formed, if you want to, right? Like, this school is like a revolutionary school, and there are hundreds of them in Mexico. They're called normal schools. It's a very old term for universities for teachers. But anyways, there's a tradition of fighting for dignity, for equality in these schools. And every year they would take a bus and they would go to Mexico City to attend a protest, to commemorate another massacre of students where almost 500 students died in 1968. So they were getting ready for this, and they got on a bus, and they started, you know, they're traveling, and they were intercepted by the state police, and they were disappeared. Like, no one knew where they went, and their parents have been looking for them for such a long time. These are all, you know, students of Indigenous descent. They are all Indigenous. Most of them speak an Indigenous language. And, you know, 43 students disappeared. And, you know, this is an area of mining. This is an area where there's a very, you know, prominent mining company that's called Canadian Torex Gold, right? So Canadian Torex Gold has been proved that they have, you know, links with drug trafficking in that area. And, you know, the Canadian government immediately issued its alert to Canadian tourists to avoid non-essential travel to that area, right? They acknowledged that that it was difficult, that it's a dangerous place to go. But then the government of Guerrero, which is the province, you know, he said to the press, and he said, how could it be that Canadian mining companies are investing many millions of dollars in Guerrero, and the Canadian government issues an alert to warn Canadian sunbathers, right? Like, so there's this contradiction between, like, it's good enough to exploit, right?
Yeah.
But it's not good enough to travel there to have your holiday there. So it's a
Can
still,
I just interject too,
yeah,
because I think we need to talk about the human trafficking that happens here in Canada to service the industry, the extraction industry, and how convenient. I would guarantee almost out of all those 43 students, how many of them were female, and even if they weren't, how much of that is human trafficking? Because yeah, as you said, the Canadian energy, companies in total control of that area.
exactly. Yeah, they literally own the communities, right? Like they pay no taxes. I think they pay 1% of their earnings in taxes, and they
Much
extract
like here,
all
those jerks.
they extract all of the wealth from the
Yeah.
communities. They pollute the water, displaced families, and then they bring all the wealth here. So no wonder when I came here, I'm like, oh, so this is where the wealth is coming to. It's, look at the roads, look at the infrastructure, look at all these companies that employ so many people with like $50 an hour, $60 an hour, where our people are getting paid 50 cents an hour,
Yeah.
right? At $2 a day. Like that's how much mining employees get in Canadian mining companies. So and also, you know, human trafficking. You know, there are many cities in the world that are known to be like for sexual tourism, and we know that many Canadian white men come to our cities and rape our children,
Yeah.
and yet, you know, but they go there and they do it there and then they hide here. And these are doctors, these are, you know, public servants, these are CEOs. Like we don't know who they are, they can be anywhere, but what we know is that they come every year and they for like for a sexual tourism destination. So that's another piece of it, right?
Yep, no, that's a huge part of it. And I mean, that's what they've been doing here to Indigenous people. And we have multiple reports and such to prove it. And yet the average Canadian is still so pretending to care about pedophilia when they just, my uncle always says for every finger pointing out, there's three pointing back.
Exactly.
And honestly, if people like had a clue of what was happening here, but then of course they'd have to start acknowledging their racism. And you're talking about basically slavery wages, but then we have our temporary foreigner worker program here. And I know you are very active at talking about the lack of rights, that it's not enough that we go over to other people's countries and exploit them, but now we're going to take some of those people and bring them here and not give them rights.
Yeah, we are our organization. We started a couple years ago, and we kind of wanted to start like as a migrant justice organization because we know there are other communities that are very organized, and we modeled ours after another one that it's called Migrante, and it's the Filipino community that they're super active with Nelly and Jay. So we modeled our organization after ours. But of course, when we started getting to know our demographics, our who who are we going to serve. So we started digging into the seasonal agricultural workers program, and so we started getting more educated around it and around the conditions of all those people that come every year. And we learned that every year around 30,000 Mexicans come to Canada to grow the food that it's on our tables. The food, the flowers, the vegetables, fruits, flowers, honey, anything you can think of. Every single piece of produce that you see, it's harvested by Mexican workers. And there's another 30,000 people from Caribbean countries, from Jamaica, Trinidad, and many other Canadian nations. So Canada has employs around 60,000 people every year who come here and work 11, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, with on in a minimum wage. They don't get paid extra time. Like the extra time is not a thing for them. They get paid minimum wage for every single hour they work. Most of these people, at least for Mexico, are of indigenous descent, racialized or indigenous, 100% indigenous. We've met many of them who speak indigenous languages, whose second language is Spanish, actually. So they face further marginalization, as you can imagine. So we started visiting the farms. And of course, the first obstacle was being able to approach them, because employers are extremely protective of them, and not in a good way. They don't want any activist coming in and looking at how they're living and, you know, listening to their concerns. They are on contracts of 8 months. So they come for 6 to 8 months and then they go back home. And they have to fulfill certain requirements. So the one that calls to my attention the most is they need to have children, you know, in order to apply for the program, because that means that they're going back to them. Like that's the way the Canadian government and the Mexican government make sure that they're going back, because they have ties to the country. Another requirement is they cannot have more education than grade 9. Right, so they are you know, explicitly saying that we don't want them to get another job, right? Because it will be very difficult for them to apply for another job with a grade 9 education in Canada, right? They're paid minimum wage, they pay CPP, they pay their pension plan and don't have access to it. They pay for EI, like unemployment insurance, and they don't have access to it. So right now, when we're all getting CRBs, well, if you're wondering where that's coming from, it's from all those migrant workers who pay lots of taxes and that face like a lot of difficulties paying taxes because it's in English, right? Like, I mean, it's difficult for us to file our taxes. Now imagine for someone that's does not speak the language. They are forced to stay in the farms at least 6 days a week. There's 1 day a week where they can go out. And if they want to go out, it's for a few hours and they have to let the employer know. There's always a manager inside that's going to let them, you know, go out. Of course, there are.
Can I just interrupt you for 1 second? Because my granny went to Indian residential school for 16 years, was only allowed to have a grade 9 education. And the manager you're describing that, you know, dictates whether or not they can come and go and what permission that they have, that's very similar to the Indian agent and the pass system that was instituted here with the Indigenous people.
That's extremely, you know, that's enraging. That's enraging. So we started visiting them and we started, yeah, like it's the colonial mindset, right? So every structure, like that's why I get so upset when people feel that it's behind. Like it's not behind, it's well and it's alive and it's exploiting it. Like it's exploiting racialized people, Indigenous, Black, and people of color here, and it's where your food comes from, and we don't even acknowledge it, right?
Well, and they had the audacity to say it was yesterday, but I mean, like today, the RCMP just pulled over an Indigenous reporter, a single mom who's reporting on the Wet'suwet'en. Last week, Calgary decided they're going to expand their, you know, city limits. There's no care or nothing about it, and the, you know, expansion of energy resources without any profit sharing has continued since forever. You know, like that is the reality. I mean, I've been working on a project talking about Indigenous getting education, post-secondary education. Most Canadians really truly believe that it's all paid for, and you know, I don't know an Indigenous person who doesn't have $30,000 worth of debt, but it's the bigger picture that, you know, not only did we have the barrier of the Indian residential school, but now we have the barrier of overcoming all of the trauma that has been imposed on us for all of these years and expected to go through a new racist institution with a smile on our face when we have the Tom Flanagans telling us we are lesser than just simply because we are Indigenous. And we can't access healthcare without it being racist. And we can't, you know, access justice without it being racist. Everything is racist that we have to come across. And yet people are so oblivious, and they have the audacity to say, oh no, that was in the past, you guys need to get over it. It's an everyday reality for me and for any other person who identifies as mixed, people of color, Black. Yeah, so I just, it makes me so angry. People deny and say it's in the past when They are doing it not just here, but they're doing it globally.
Exactly. And it's a mindset, like the colonial mindset of possessing, of owning people, owning the land, owning everything. There has to be a property, sign on everything, including people's lives. Like these people, for example, the workers, like, they're here for 8 months. Some of them have been coming for 15 years, 18 years, 20 years. Some of them have grandchildren. Like when you picture agricultural workers, you think, oh, these are young people in their 20s who are, like summer job. No, these are grandparents, right? They've been coming for 15, 18 years, and they have no pathway to citizenship. So they are away from their family 8 months a year. So really, really, they live in Canada and they go to Mexico for 4 months, right? And they don't have a pathway to citizenship simply because of their origin, simply because they are part of these seasonal agricultural programs. So how is that not a racist policy? How is that not a white supremacist policy, right? So when we talk to them, we listen to them, and after a while, if we are able to address this and like raise the political awareness, and we come together to the realization, and they are extremely aware of their situation. I think that's the saddest part, is that they know exactly why can't be residents. They've told us, like, of course they don't want us to be residents, because then they will have to respect our rights, and then they will have to pay us like a decent wage, and they don't want us to do anything else in Canada except grow their food. So they're like, one of them told me, this is my last year, but next year my son is coming. So it's an unending circle of poverty and of marginalization that puts food on our tables. And I think it's time for Canadians to acknowledge it, for everyone to acknowledge it, and to support the efforts for a non-precarious status for them, like a pathway to citizenship, which is going to be our main goal. So right now we are building bridges of solidarity. We are visiting them. We are they're becoming our friends, which is an amazing experience. We just started a pilot program for English as a second language. I am teaching English via Zoom, and it's an amazing opportunity just to connect with them, to listen to them, to learn from them, because they're really the experts of their situation and of their oppressions, such as this precarity in their immigration status. So we are really happy that we were able to land our objective as an organization, and I think that's what we're going to continue to do, just continue to visit farms and have screenings of a documentary that's called The Contract, El Contrato. I invite everyone to watch that documentary. It's by a Korean female director. She's brilliant, and it really brings light to the issue. And so we're going to continue to, during the season, we're going to continue to visit them, getting to know them, learn from them, and then off season, we're going to do this work of raising awareness among the Canadian public.
Excellent. So that link, if you send it to me, then I will share it with this podcast so that people know to look into it. I mean, honestly, you can Google this stuff, but very clearly Canadians, even when you give them the links, you give them the books, you give them the PDF, it's just too hard and overwhelming for them to possibly comprehend. So, the sooner we can give them all of the information that's, once again, spoon-fed to them, yet they just simply have this cognitive dissonance. I'm just being a jerk because right now my Twitter is going a little nuts. It's just some stupid kids from Lethbridge put together a stupid company called White and Privileged, and they're so dumb. They actually don't even, they're like, I didn't grow up privileged, as they sit on Blackfoot territory, with their guns, and like there's this rumor out there from the folks down there that all of the cops' kids have their own little like stupid gang where they shoot each other in the, well, whatever, they're just idiots. So
Yeah, and rural Alberta, I mean, you know it better than I do. Like I've been just here for a couple of years, but we organized a rally here in Cochrane. It was great. We had a great turnout. And after the rally for Black Lives Matter and anti-racism, we started like a follow-up effort. So we started an anti-racism series, like educational series here in Cochrane. And we have the support of the town of Cochrane. They've been amazing.
yeah.
But and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. They're probably going to cancel the series after I say this. But the thing is, I got a message from one of the people of the workers in town of Cochrane, and they said that a resident of Cochrane had sent a letter to mayor and council. They were extremely offended that the word whiteness was in the poster. So they were asking the town to cancel the series or get rid of the word whiteness in the poster, because the poster says like, we're going to educate you around whiteness, white privilege and race, and all of those basic terms that everyone should understand. And then there's this guy, like I later learned that it was a guy, basically Karening the conversation.
Chad. His name is Chad. Yeah.
Yeah, Chad emailed or sent a letter, and also they threatened to start a petition against the town of Cochrane if they didn't cancel the event. So thank you for illustrating whiteness, right? I mean, you're so upset about the word whiteness, but you're here, like giving us a living example of what weaponizing whiteness is. It's the first time ever that Cochrane, like the community, sees an effort like this. And, they're triggered, but I always think of, okay, so you guys are triggered because I'm talking about whiteness in rural Alberta, but where are my trigger warnings? Where are my trigger warnings for everything I experience here? Right?
Really and truly, they first of all, we're speaking English because they forced us to. They named me Indian. Like, get over it. You just can't. Then they tell us to get over it.
Exactly. It was sad and funny and, very concerning, but also like a living proof that we need to continue this work. And I was telling my husband, I was telling him, you know what, like, if they want to pull out, if town of Cochrane, they won't. They've been extremely supportive. They called me and we had a great conversation. I think they're ready for a conversation. But I just say, you know what, the demographics in rural Alberta are changing. Like, we are here. We are not, we're here. Our communities are growing. People of every race is coming to rural Alberta. And what you have is a time bomb. If you don't address the racism in your communities, it's a time bomb. Like, there are going to be racial tensions, and unfortunately there's going to be a lot of problems with racism if we don't address it right away. So it's your choice. Like, you want to deal with it in a proactive way by having these educational opportunities, or you want to react once we have more issues, because we're going to continue to push. Like, we're not going to stop fighting for our own dignity, for our humanity to be recognized. Like, we have children, so I'd much rather fight it myself than having my daughter face it during her life here in Cochrane. So you're kind of just challenging us, man. Like, we're just gonna keep going, really, with the anti-racism initiatives and work. So yeah, that was one funny thing that happened this week that we've been dealing with.
Uh,
Yeah.
but and it's all the time, like, so we called out the racism of Lethbridge, but now I have some right wing like commentator trying to pretend that she knows anything other than where her nail polish is, and like it's incredible to me that they're so threatened by the word white when all of these years they had not had just the word black or an Indian put on us, but all sorts of wonderful derogatory words that go along with it.
And
And
the names, right? Like, they've always, I don't know, when like now people are now so triggered about the use of the word Karen, or like the name Karen to name like entitled white women. but they've been calling us Maria forever. Like Latino women have always been Maria. We have always been over sexualized, hyper sexualized. We've always been treated like pieces of meat. And now you're offended because for 10 months we've called you Karen because we're holding that power. Something else that happened to me this morning, and just as an extra, is I'm part of I'm in many different groups in Facebook. I'm very active in Facebook. So I was in a teacher group, teacher memes, it's called. So I'm just there for the fun, right? But I wasn't in the best mood this morning when someone posted like a quiz of a little boy or girl, not sure, that a little human being that he was asked in a quiz, how do you call like the obstacles for people of color. So I don't know what the context was. I think the first question was around segregation, the second was what was around other issues in civil rights movement, but the third question was around like, well, how are those obstacles called, and he answered white people. So of course we were all like laughing about it, and teachers were commenting, but of course you're gonna have those teachers, many teachers, extremely offended that we're laughing about it. This is serious. This is reverse racism. This, who taught this boy or girl that? Like, we need to address it. And they were so concerned. So I went on, and I never do this. I don't like doing this to myself because I know I will spend 2 hours of my day responding to ignorant comments.
Yep.
But once in a while, especially when there are teachers, it gets personal, because then they are responsible for little human beings, for me, tiny human beings, and someone has to call them out. So like I engaged in conversations and realized that honestly, like many teachers in that, at least in that thread, were very like racially illiterate, I like to call them. They have no idea what they're talking about, but they sure have an opinion on race.
Yep.
They have no idea what they're talking about, but they sure have an opinion, a very strong opinion. And so I think the last thing I said was, because one of them said like she had been a white girl in an all black school, and she had faced so much racism, and how can you laugh about that? I'm like, you might have experienced prejudice or discrimination, but you did not face racism, because to face racism there has to be power involved, and you have the power, and you've always had the power, and the minute you walked out of that school you had the power, right? So the last thing I said is, you know what, I know you are trying to gaslight us, you are trying to bully us into not having an opinion, you are laughing at us, and you are saying that we are indoctrinated and that we are neo-Marxists, and I don't know how much and we are Antifa or whatever they say, and that's all you guys trying to bully us, and we're not scared anymore.
No.
We are educated, and we are getting our children prepared for a white supremacist world. So you have two options: you get educated and you face progress, or you run and hide, because your time's up. Like, we are standing up for what we believe. We're speaking out. We're calling out your white fragility. We're calling out your racism, and our children will call you out too. So as a teacher, you have the obligation to get educated or retire, because there's no other option for you.
Literally, you just made the case why I have to homeschool, because like, that's so much, there's so much freaking privilege that they don't understand, that they're used to 99% of the kids being white, so it's perfectly okay to use white coding language that talks about white supremacy. But my daughter, although she may be blonde and blue-eyed, she's not white, she's native. So when she hears the racism that comes out of white coding and white conversation and white supremacy, it hurts her. And then worse, because the teachers are so oblivious. Like, at the start of this last year, the CBE came out with a report saying, oh my God, we are so not having a bullying problem because we investigated ourselves and we didn't ask a single parent or a single student, but we, the teachers, we know we are not bullying.
Sounds like the RCMP.
Right?
The
Exactly.
police.
So like my daughter was interviewed and spoke out because like literally she hears gay slurs in front of the GSA teacher and they're like, what gay slur? Who says things like that? And she's a woman, so they already have that internalized sexism, so they don't like acknowledge their own sexism in what they talk about and how they disregard the girls in their class. And I'm like, how can you be so dumb? And the worst part is they think they're not just woke, but they're saving these kids from a gang life. A teacher actually said that to me, and I was like, you and your white saviorism. They're not ready for a little girl who has like indigenous pride. They're not ready for that. They have this, trauma porn stereotype that they have in their head, and they can't think outside that box because that's not what they've been taught. And the NHL team is playing, so I'm going to watch that instead of watching a documentary by an indigenous person talking about racism in Canada or talking about exploitation across the globe that are coming from Calgary. It's unbelievable to me that we have to keep talking about this, and there's just a small group of people that are willing to listen to it. It's unbelievable to me.
Yeah, we're struggling with numbers for this series in Cochrane. I'm like, you know what? If we get 10 people attending, that's something. Like we're doing something, and we're just like, at least for myself, I have to come to the realization that the work's we're never gonna finish, that we're gonna die, and there's still gonna be work to do.
Yeah.
So that's my motivation. My motivation every day is go there and transform whatever you can transform. If it's your children you are focusing on, perfect. If you are raising healthy masculinities, if you have sons and you're raising healthy masculinities and that's your purpose in life, that's great.
Yes.
But something like, we have to start somewhere, right? Yep. So I am so happy to know that there are efforts being made. I noticed that some Facebook groups. So if any of your listeners are in rural Alberta, now there are groups that are like, for example, Cochrane Progressives, Airdrie Progressives, Strathmore Progressives, and there are several groups that now we're organizing, we're coming together, especially with this horrible government that we have in Alberta, with this I have other words to describe it, but I'm not going to use them. But this horrible, horrible government with this non-existent plan for, going back to school. My daughter is staying home as well, and that's the main reason. I'm terrified of, because, and that's another thing, like my subjectivity, like my reality and many other people's reality is different. Like I had people die from this virus. Like I had 2 aunties die from this virus in Mexico, right? So it's real for many of us. It's real, and we are being told that we are paranoid, but it's just, that's privilege talking. When they told us that we are paranoid, it's like, yeah, you didn't know my auntie who was healthy and then who died from this. So of course I'm going to be worried about my health and the health of my daughter. And all those examples of privilege that just have shown up after COVID, and we need to tackle. We need to face them and keep fighting to address that, mainly for our future generations, so that they don't have to go through what we went through in a racist, colonial, patriarchal, settler country, right? That's Canada.
I cannot believe, I never thought in a million years we'd have to be fighting freedom germs right now. Mm-hmm. Where you have all of this mindset of people who are like, oh, I'm fine, never wear a mask anywhere they go. It is unbelievable to me, that type of privilege that people have to just think, oh no, this is totally fine. But it's also because they know that if something were to happen to them, they'd have a nice little white, ambulance driver happily take their nice little white butts to the nice white hospital where they will get proper care.
Exactly.
And that's the difference too, is that I know when I call the police, when I call an ambulance, when I go to the hospital, I'm not getting the same care they're getting. And that's the other part of this conversation of freedom germs that, you know, so frustrating. Anyway, I really appreciate you being on my show. Just any last thoughts before we close out?
Yeah, just, thank you, Michelle, for having me. And just, I always, I'm always learning about Indigenous resilience and Indigenous history and all the wisdom and all the knowledge. And I am just so honored to be a guest in this land. And I try every day to, do better, and do better and honor the Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous history, and be a good guest, just leave this place better than when I arrived. And being a settler, being a settler of Latinx descent, I just, when I attend to all these conversations of Black Lives Matter, or Indigenous reconciliation and all these important issues, I would always like to open the conversation to our brothers and sisters in the South, because there are so many issues that they're facing. There's repression. Their lands are being stolen. They are also disappearing in great numbers, especially women. The violence, that our countries have faced, the human rights violations with the support of colonial imperialist countries. So I think if we come together, and if we see this as a global issue, we will be stronger, and we will be able to face adversity in a better way. So I will just invite everyone to connect with, or learn about the colonial history of Latin America, of Mexico, and strengthen our links, and be stronger together.
Yes. I want to remind everybody that Mexico was still part of Turtle Island. And it's so funny to hear an Indigenous woman tell an Indigenous woman she's a settler because, you're being displaced because of neoliberal capitalist policies originating literally from here. And that's the irony, is that our ancestors would have never said, no to anybody. And worse, we actually helped the very colonizers that ended up giving us, the smallpox and all the other germ warfare, because, human beings caring about human beings. So it's so hard for me to imagine how hard it is to leave your ancestral lands and try to find a better place to be. So I just hope with all of my heart, from one Indigenous sister to another Indigenous sister, talking about imperial colonialism originating from the very place that we're recording, like the power in that.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, we the Indigenous people in Latin America call it Abya Yala. Abya Yala is the traditional name for Latin America, and we always try to address Latin America as Abya Yala, because that honors our history, honors our traditional knowledge, our traditional lands, and the original peoples in there, and it also reminds us of the history of colonization in those territories. So thank you, Michelle, and we're in this together. So let's keep fighting. The fight's not over, and I think there's a lot to do. So thank you for all your efforts with your podcast, and we'll continue to spread the word on this fight.
Yes. Well, I invite you to chime in as I go through the closing. I'm sure you've heard it a million times because you're one of my actual listeners, and I'm so grateful to have you on my show. So if you want to chime in at any point in time, don't hesitate. Indigenous have been talking about these issues, sharing our traumas in reports, commissions, and public hearings just so it can be regularly disregarded. No more. Honor our words, honor our treaties. Listen to politicians and their policies and platforms. They don't recognize the marginalized in their budget with Gender Equity Plus, if they're cutting violence prevention programs and services, Indigenous education, uterus health choices, gay straight alliance, and how should we put this as well? Let's add to this and talk about, lack of human rights for immigrant status. What are your thoughts there, Vanessa?
Yeah, I think, yeah, just acknowledging that there's a history of colonialism for all those migrants to be here. It's not their choice. It's not our choice for sure to
Mhm.
come and speak a different language, to speak another colonizer's language, because we have to speak Spanish because it's the colonizer's language. It's all we've got. But now we come here and we also have to talk a second language of also colonizers. So
Right.
we are in this permanent loop of of getting away from our history, but totally addressing the oppression and marginalization, that it's intentional, it's
Mhm.
calculated,
Yep.
it's racialized, it's gendered, it's so many other it's so much to unpack. The immigration issues, like immigration's not a cause. It's immigration. It's a result of policies, of racist, colonial, neoliberal policies. So the more we understand that, the more we'll be able to empathize with those who are here, and the more
Mhm.
people will be educated not to say go back to your country. I would, if I could, except there's like a drug war, because U.S. people consume so many drugs that we pay the price with death and with violence, and they put the dollars and we put the the debts. So I would go back if I could, except neocolonialism is a thing, and we
Yep.
don't actually need to be invaded like by military to be controlled by the US, right? So it's a form of neocolonialism, and it's a right. We would go back, but we just can't because we are in a neo-colonial state.
That's
Leave
right.
us alone.
Right. So folks need to know that vote, that the power of their vote is like
Exactly.
directly impacting you in this way. Demand that they implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to actions, the recommendations of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the multiple reports about child welfare reform, violence prevention, and now 231 calls to justice from the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, Two Spirit. Denying those reports is a form of abuse called gaslighting. Our people are experiencing extreme racism in the educational, health, justice institutions with multiple reports that say the same things. Demand change from election platforms and politicians. If they don't understand colonialism, race, privilege, ableism, sexism, they literally have zero business running. This should be understood by all parties, all local politicians, community organizations, sports organizations. Really great article I said out loud in episode 62 is Six Truth Before Truth, How Non-Indigenous Canadians Become Allies. Google it. I want to do cultural safety. So I kind of give you some do's and don'ts. So you got to look at this as, first stage for marginalization. So you can take, Vanessa's course, you can read books. Like, this information is out there. You have to do something when you see oppression. Having good intentions is not enough. Take action to make change. Speak out against racism, oppression. Ask questions with those with more understanding. Find allies. Create a support system for yourself and help you advocate for more culturally safe approaches. Vanessa, I wanted to ask you if you're finding that the group you're working with is really, trying to create that support system with some of those Facebook groups that you were talking about and referencing.
To be honest, yeah, a little bit. It's difficult to see outside, and I struggle with progressive circles because of that. There's so much around. We are against the UCP and we're against conservative government, but as soon as you bring out these issues of racialized oppression, it's difficult. And there's the white fragility going on in many of the circles. So I'm really trying to bring more that conversation forward. They have all good intentions, and I'm very happy that these groups exist, but I think they need to be exposed to these issues a little bit more,
Yes.
because we're not
Mhm.
kind of like in a bubble. Progressive movements are like in a bubble. So we have a Facebook page. It's called Asociación de Mexicanos en Calgary. So it's Association of Mexicans in Calgary. We have a Facebook page, and we're working together with Migrante. So if you can look up Migrante, Migrante has been a great supporter of these struggles. They are anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist. The Philippines has a very similar history to Mexican history in colonization and neoliberalism. So we share so much that we work together with them. So if you can support Migrante, you are supporting us as well, because we are partnered organizations.
Amazing. Thank you. Take responsibility for your own learning. Read, reflect, ask questions. Vanesa's literally spoon feeding you resources here. Don't always expect this learning to come from Indigenous people, because likely we've already put it out there and all you got to do is Google it. Take time for self-reflection. Be aware of your own assumptions and biases. Question everything you've learned about Indigenous people and take steps to actively disrupt the stereotypes. So I'm just going to go over that one more time. Be aware of your own assumptions and biases. I don't know why it takes a white male in order for you to hear it, but if I say it, Vanesa says it, and you still don't hear it, but a white male says it, this is your bias that's being exposed, and you need to take time for that self-reflection, and you need to question yourself why it is you cannot hear it from me, why it is you cannot hear it from Vanesa, but as soon as Mr. White Male says it, you suddenly can hear it. That is your bias. Commit to lifelong learning. Be prepared to be uncomfortable. Understanding colonialism and the legacy of racism is an ongoing and difficult task. So this is more for Karen. This is for Chad. You are going to be uncomfortable unlearning all of the comforts that you have taken for granted and at the expense of other Indigenous lives. So if you're wondering what I just said, that is what is Indigenous cultural safety and why I should care about it at heretohelp.bc.ca. They were the ones who listed it. Internalized racism, lateral violence. Vanesa and I spoke a little bit about it, but there's so much information out there on it. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's when, I, as an Indigenous person, pretend I am just Canadian. And I am a great Canadian. And we should just do what our Prime Minister says always without ever questioning him, because good Canadians don't question their Prime Minister. That would be internalized racism. I'm a liberal. I literally am part of Team Trudeau. I'm telling you, internalized racism is a thing I see everywhere across Canada. So if you are unapologetically, with Team Trudeau, that's problematic. Even within conservative circles, they question their own leader and question some of the decisions that they made. There's nothing wrong with, talking about what lateral violence, internalized racism is, but I am not a Canadian. I'm a Dene woman. And I'm trying to work with the Canadian government because that is the treaty obligation my ancestors signed to. So anyway, internalized racism, lateral violence is another form of violence Indigenous and marginalized folks experienced by the structure of racism imposed on these lands. So that's why there is no such thing as reverse racism, Karen or Chad. Equitytools.org by Donna Bevins. There's some more information about internalized racism. The American Friends Service Committee has do and don'ts for bystander intervention when you see harassment against people who are in some way oppressed. And I'm just going to go over the don't call the police part, because I know what you may experience from the police is not necessarily what I'm going to experience from the police. And for many communities right now, Arab, Muslim, Black, queer, trans, immigrants, the police can actually cause a greater danger for the person being harassed. Don't escalate the situation. The goal is to get the person to safety, not incite further violence from the attacker. And don't do nothing, because your silence is dangerous. It communicates approval and leaves the victim high and dry. So if you find yourself too nervous or afraid to speak out, you can move closer to that person. And I always encourage people to give someone their card, because it validates it. And then later, if they choose to speak out against it, at least they have you as a witness. Teach your kids about accountability in a positive way, because people are learning it from somewhere. And we know that the kids from, white and privileged down in Lethbridge sure are learning it from somewhere. So if you're experiencing emotional distress and want to talk, you can call the First Nation and Inuit Hope for wellness helpline at 1-855-242-3310. It is toll-free, open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Violence is just my everyday reality. Every Indigenous generation has faced it. That's why I started this podcast, to speak freely without interruption, without tone police, without leadership shaming, without gaslighting questions, as many people don't want to hear about racism or hear an Indigenous opinion, but sure want to tell us theirs. Usually by people who know nothing about racism or Indigenous or know nothing about colonialism. They don't know anything about the constant surveillance of Indigenous people, our protests, our vigils, and our rights. They just call the cops. It's typical microaggressions and people dealing with internalized racism, people who are gatekeepers, survive off the status quo, or people who are still in their trauma, and they stop people from doing the work and deplete personal resources. Internal and external racism is an everyday reality for people of color, for Indigenous, for Black people, for mixed people. And that's why I needed this podcast as a boundary, just to be heard. So I want to say thank you to my ancestors, my granny, my mom, of what strength looks like through your example. I want to say thank you to my dad for teaching me to be strong and blunt. My stepmom for showing me what a proud culture is through her Austrian family and roots, and stepping up and teaching me how to be a proud Calgarian. It is through her I'm a second generation proud Calgarian. Thank you to my husband Darcy for producing and editing this show. On top of being my husband, my childhood friend, father of our child, and my support on down the red road, he has witnessed decades of racism and sexism. And to our child, who we are blessed to learn from daily, we are honored you chose us. You give me daily accountability to be a better and stronger person. I hope my daughter and my family will be proud in the future of me trying to discuss these present day racial issues in a way that they'll understand down the road. Again, my Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you, Adam, Alexandria, Beatrice, Ben, Beth, Brian, Kat, Celine, Christina, Crystal, Diana, Jana, Jenny, Jocelyn, Judy, Karen, Kathy, Kenna, Leah, Lisi, Marisa, Melissa, Morami, Natalie, Nathan, Rebecca, The Sprawl, Shara, Sharon, Tammy, Tiffany, Vanessa, and Veronica. Thank you all for signing up. And in Vanessa's case, thank you for being on my show. And if you did one donation or many and had to quit for financial reasons, please know I appreciate your support. If you value listening and can afford to give, thank you. To those that cannot afford to give but listen in, love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or questions. I also have a YouTube channel, and I'd love to have you subscribe. For podcasts, we applied on Spotify, we are on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and I want to end with that side eye to those Calgary rabbits. You're lucky I'm not Tradish. My beautiful cousin would respond, or you'd be in my dish. Vanessa, thank you for being on my show.
Thank you, Michelle. Sending love.
Always.